My name is Julia Merrick, I'm 27, and my parents charged me $1,800 every month to live in their house, while my brother stayed for free. If you've ever faced something like this, comment where you're reading from. On Wednesday at 2010, I was in the living room folding laundry, the smell of detergent sharp in the air, when my father dropped the words casually over the TV noise. Don't forget, Julia. Rent's due on the 1st. 1800. No excuses. I froze with a towel in my hands. Across the hall, my brother was sprawled on the couch scrolling his phone, not paying a dime. He even had pizza delivered twice this week without tossing $1 into the grocery fund. The unfairness stung every time, but I stayed quiet. Dad called it teaching responsibility. Mom nodded along, saying, "Your brother's still finding himself. Don't pressure him." I'd been paying since I was 22. 5 years of checks neat and on time. $1,800 times 60 months equals $108,000. Money that could have been a down payment on a place of my own. That night, as I slid the rent envelope into my father's desk drawer, the paper felt heavier than usual. I'd been saving in secret too, every freelance payment tucked away. And they didn't know what I was about to do. I didn't know yet that in just 2 weeks, when they asked for the next month's rent, I'd hand them keys instead. Keys not to their house but to mine. The following Saturday at 9:15 a.m. The kitchen was already filled with the smell of frying bacon and burnt toast when my dad walked in holding the stack of bills. The sunlight slanted across the linoleum floor, turning the scratches into bright lines. I was pouring coffee into my chipped blue mug when he slapped the papers down onto the counter. "Julia, property tax went up this year. Starting next month it's $1,950, he said, as if announcing a weather report. I blinked at him. $1,950? For one bedroom and a shared bathroom? My brother shuffled in, still in pajama pants, scratching his head. He opened the fridge, grabbed a carton of orange juice and drank straight from it. Dad didn't even glance his way. "Your brother's between jobs," Dad continued, folding the bill. "He doesn't need that pressure. You're working full-time plus you're freelancing. You can handle it." I felt the heat rising to my cheeks. I've already paid 60 months in a row. That's over $100,000. He's lived here just as long and paid nothing. Mom stepped in, tying her robe tighter. Her perfume, floral, too sweet for mornings, drifted in. "Julia, don't be dramatic. You know your brother struggles. We're helping him get back on his feet. Besides, rent teaches you discipline." I set the mug down too hard, coffee sloshing onto the counter. And what does letting him freeload teach him? Silence. The ticking of the kitchen clock filled the gap. My brother smirked faintly, wiping juice from his mouth with the back of his hand. Dad cleared his throat. "Rules are rules. You don't like it? You can always leave." The words landed heavier than the smell of burnt toast. I dried the spill with a paper towel, every movement sharp, deliberate. Fine, I thought. If they saw me as a tenant, not a daughter, then I'd play the role. But this tenant was already making other plans. I walked back to my room, the carpet rough under my bare feet, and opened my laptop. In a folder labeled Future, a spreadsheet glowed. Every freelance payment I tucked away, every dollar I hadn't told them about. Current balance: $143,200. Enough for something real. I stared at the number until my breathing slowed. The unfairness still stung, but beneath it a seed of resolve had taken root. Next time they demanded rent, I wouldn't hand them an envelope. I'd hand them my way out. Looking back, the pattern was carved deeper than I wanted to admit. It started when I was 17. My parents insisted I pay $200 a month for utilities, even though I barely earned anything at my part-time grocery job. Meanwhile, my brother, then 19, burned through Dad's gas card driving his friends to parties, and no one said a word. At 20, when I commuted to community college, Dad raised my contribution to $600. "Life isn't free, Julia," he said. My brother dropped out of his IT course that same year, and instead of responsibility he got sympathy. "He's figuring things out," Mom explained, sliding him $20 bills for beer and takeout. By 22 the rent started, $1,200 flat, to cover your share. I was fresh out of school, starting an entry-level office job that paid $34,000 a year. Nearly half my paycheck vanished into their account each month. My brother? He moved back home after losing his third job in 3 years and paid nothing. Mom even cleaned his laundry, humming while she folded his shirts. Every time I pushed back, the answers were the same. You're more responsible. You can handle it. Don't compare yourself to him, he has different struggles. Over the years I kept quiet and wrote checks. Some nights, lying in my childhood bedroom with its peeling posters still clinging to the walls, I calculated the totals in my head like a mantra. 1,200, then 1,500, then 1,800. By last winter, I realized I'd paid more into my parents' house than the down payment on most condos in town. The irony gnawed at me. My father worked 30 years at the factory, my mother at the insurance office, preaching savings, responsibility, independence. Yet they kept me tethered under their roof, paying for the privilege, while my brother floated free of consequence. What was at stake now wasn't just money. It was dignity. Every check I signed felt like proof I wasn't a daughter in their eyes, just a walking deposit slip. I kept every receipt. I printed bank statements. I tracked dates in neat rows on a yellow legal pad. $1,200, June 2018. $1,500, February 2020. $1,800, September 2023. 60 lines of ink, totaling $108,000. I wasn't planning to fight them with shouting matches or pleas. I was building something quiet, steady, undeniable. And when the time came, the imbalance that had defined my 20s would break. Not with another check, but with keys. 2 nights later at 22:40, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom carpet with the old shoebox pulled from under my bed. The cardboard was warped, edges softened from years of use. When I lifted the lid, the faint smell of paper and dust filled the room. Inside was my ledger of injustice. Dozens of crumpled receipts, folded envelopes, and carbon copy slips from checks I'd written over 5 years. Each one bore my handwriting. Rent, utilities, March 2019, $1,200. Rent, August 2020, $1,500. Rent, June 2023, $1,800. I spread them out across the floor like playing cards. The lamp on my desk cast a yellow glow, edges of the papers curling in the heat. My eyes stung as I read the totals again. Line by line, month by month, the evidence shouted what I had swallowed. I had been their tenant, not their daughter. I picked up one slip, the ink smudged where my pen must have hesitated. February 2021, $1,650. I remembered that month. My car's transmission had failed. The repair bill $3,200. I begged Dad to let me pay late. He folded his arms and said, "Rules are rules. Rent doesn't wait." My brother was unemployed then, sleeping till noon, but still hadn't paid a dime. The anger rose hot in my chest, but under it was something calmer. Clarity. I opened my laptop and began scanning the receipts one by one. The whir of the machine hummed steady, each page sliding under the glass. File names stacked on my desktop. Rent_June 2018. PDF. Rent_October 2019. PDF. Rent_Jan 2022. PDF. Then I logged into my savings account. The balance blinked back at me. $143,200. Years of late-night freelance gigs, design projects, marketing edits, surveys at $20 a pop, stacked in secret while they thought they had me trapped. I created a folder titled Proof and dragged the scans inside. Then added a screenshot of my savings account. A neat contrast. What they took versus what I had built despite them. For a moment I just sat there, knees aching from the carpet, the room silent except for the soft buzz of the lamp. My fingertips brushed the receipts, their paper rough, edges sharp. This wasn't just clutter anymore. It was leverage. I closed the shoebox, slid it back under the bed and whispered into the quiet. "Next time you ask for rent, I'll show you this instead." And for the first time in years I felt like I was holding the upper hand. The following Thursday at 16:20, I sat across from a lawyer in a second-floor office above a strip of shuttered shops. The air smelled faintly of old carpet and printer toner. Outside the window, rain streaked down in uneven trails, blurring the neon sign from the laundromat across the street. I had brought the shoebox, now neatly filled with scanned receipts, and slid it across his desk. He adjusted his thin-rimmed glasses, flipped open the lid, and began leafing through the stack. 60 months of rent checks, he muttered, tapping one page with his pen. All in your name, signed, cashed into their joint account. Total comes to... Let me calculate. His fingers flew across a calculator. 108,000 even. Not including the months you paid utilities on top. I nodded, throat tight. My brother lived there too. Paid nothing. The lawyer raised his eyebrows. So you carried not just your weight but his. He set the calculator down, its plastic warm from his hand. And now they're increasing you to $1,950 starting next month? Yes. Dad said property tax went up. The lawyer leaned back. You don't owe them rent legally. You're their daughter, not a tenant. But since you've documented every payment, you have proof of how much you contributed. If you ever wanted to push back, these receipts are your defense. More than that, they're leverage. Leverage. The word stuck. I pressed my palms together under the table, the skin damp with nerves. So what I've been doing, it wasn't pointless? Not at all, he said. You've essentially paid for your own future. You could take those savings. He nodded toward the bank statement printout I'd added to the pile, and put them into something that's yours. No one could argue with that. The clock on the wall ticked over to 16:45, loud in the quiet room. I thought of all the evenings I'd handed over envelopes while my brother lounged in the living room. I thought of my mother's perfume mixing with detergent in the hallway as she reminded me. Rent isn't optional. I stood, slipping the shoebox back into my tote, the strap cut into my shoulder, heavy but grounding. Thank you, I said softly. Walking back into the rain, I felt the cold drops soak into my hair, but inside me something steadier had formed. 8 days left until the first of the month. 8 days until they asked again. And this time I wouldn't hand them a check. The first of the month arrived on a gray Friday. At 7:32 a.m. The smell of scrambled eggs filled the kitchen, and the morning news droned about traffic on the interstate. I sat at the table with my chipped blue mug, both hands wrapped around it, waiting. Right on cue, Dad appeared, hair still damp from his shower. He dropped his usual line as if it were clockwork. Julia, rent's due today. $19.50. I reached into my tote bag, heart pounding. Instead of the white envelope he expected, I placed a small ring of keys onto the table. They clinked sharply against the wood. Silver, new, glinting in the weak morning light. He frowned. What's this? Mom turned from the stove, spatula hovering midair. Even my brother, still in pajama pants, looked up from his phone. I slid a thin folder next to the keys. It's not rent. It's proof. Receipts, 60 months, every check I wrote. $108,000. And a savings account I built on top of it. As of yesterday, I closed on a condo. 8 blocks from here. Those are my keys. Silence slammed down on the kitchen harder than any words. Dad blinked. You what? I'm done paying for a childhood bedroom while he lives here for free. I nodded toward my brother. I'm done being your tenant. Mom's voice rose, shaky. You went behind our backs? I held her gaze. No. I went forward. I pulled out one receipt dated March 2019 and pressed it flat on the table. The ink was faint but the numbers still legible. This was when my car broke down. I begged for a month's grace. You said no. Meanwhile, he hadn't paid a cent. I kept every slip, every check, every month. And now I don't need to ask for grace anymore. Dad's jaw clenched. He didn't reach for the receipt. He just stared at the keys, as though they were heavier than the bills in his hand. My brother muttered, You're overreacting, but his voice lacked bite. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the linoleum. This is the last breakfast I'll have as your tenant. Next time you want rent, look at those receipts. I gathered my bag, leaving the keys and the folder behind. The door shut behind me with a click that sounded louder than the news anchor still talking on the TV. For once, I wasn't walking out with less. I was walking out with mine. The shockwaves didn't take long. By the following week, I was fully moved into my condo. 780 square feet. 1 bedroom with tall windows that overlooked the park, and a kitchen that still smelled faintly of fresh paint. When I set my red kettle on the new stovetop and heard the first whistle echo in the empty space, it felt like freedom had a sound. Back at my parents' house, the silence I left behind wasn't so freeing. My aunt called me on Tuesday, whispering like she was passing gossip across a church pew. "Your mom's furious. Says you blindsided them." But everyone's asking the same question. Why did they make you pay while your brother coasted? The whisper spread faster than I expected. A cousin texted, "You were right. We always noticed the difference." For years, I thought I was the only one keeping count. Turns out the family had seen it too. They just hadn't spoken. Meanwhile, my brother floundered. Without me quietly padding the household bills, the imbalance showed. By mid-month, Dad started snapping at him about groceries and gas money. "You're 30 now," I overheard one evening when I stopped by to collect mail. "Get a job. Julia's not here to cover you anymore." The irony burned and soothed at once. For me, consequences looked different. Lighter, quieter. My bank app no longer blinked red every month. Instead of an $1,800 withdrawal, I watched my balance grow. At work, I signed a new freelance contract. $6,500 over 3 months, and earmarked it for my condo's furniture fund. One evening, Mom called. Her voice was softer than usual but tight. "You embarrassed us, Julia. Leaving like that. Waving receipts around." I took a breath, steady and slow. "I didn't embarrass you. I revealed what you chose to ignore." Silence. Then the faint sound of her exhale before she hung up. At my condo that night, I opened the sliding glass door and let the cool air drift in. The city lights flickered like distant stars. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating rent due dates or waiting for the next envelope demand. Consequences were unfolding everywhere. In their house, in my brother's slouching shoulders, in the way Dad avoided my eyes when I dropped by. But in mine, consequences looked like peace. It was late October, 2 weeks after I moved out, when the final push came. At 7:18 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Dad. "Family meeting. Sunday. Be there." The bluntness wasn't unusual, but the timing felt deliberate. That Sunday, I drove back to the old house. The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and something burnt from the oven. My brother sat hunched on the couch, arms crossed, eyes darting away when I walked in. Mom stood by the mantel, hands clasped like she was hosting a sermon. Dad cleared his throat. "Julia, your mother and I talked. We think you overreacted. You made us look bad in front of the family. Your brother's been struggling, and you flaunted money instead of helping." I set my tote bag on the coffee table, pulled out the folder and laid it down. The edges were worn from weeks of use, but inside every page was crisp. "This isn't flaunting. It's proof." I slid the first page across. March 2019 $1,200. Paid in full. September 2021 $1,700. Paid in full. August 2023 $1,800. Paid in full. 60 months, no gaps. Mom's lips tightened. "That was responsibility. You lived under our roof." "And him." I gestured toward my brother. 5 years, not $1. My brother bristled. I couldn't. Things were hard. I opened my phone and tapped a photo. A screenshot of his Instagram story from June, him holding up a cocktail on a Miami balcony. The caption, "Work hard, play harder." I turned the screen toward Dad. His jaw clenched. Mom's face paled. "Hard?" I asked quietly. "He had money for flights, hotels, drinks. He just didn't have money for you. Or rather, you never asked." The clock on the wall ticked past 8:02, the sound sharp in the silence. I leaned back, voice steady. "I didn't humiliate you. I stopped being humiliated." For once, neither of them had a reply. Even my brother sank lower into the couch, his bravado gone. The truth was laid bare on paper, on screens, in their own contradictions. No more twisting, no more guilt. I gathered my folder, stood, and let the silence do the work. The gap between their version and mine had closed. Facts had sealed it shut. It's been 3 months since that last family meeting. And my life looks nothing like it did before. My condo has begun to feel like a home. The walls no longer echo when I walk through the hallway. I hung framed prints of my own photos. The lake in winter, the city skyline at sunset. The kitchen smells of cinnamon most evenings. I bake just for myself, something I never did at my parents' house where the oven always belonged to someone else. I set routines, quiet but powerful. No late-night rent envelopes, no guilt-laden phone calls. On the first of each month, instead of watching $1,950 vanish, I transfer $620 to my mortgage account. The rest stays mine. I watch the numbers grow slowly, steadily, like proof of my own boundary made tangible. My brother hasn't called. Mom sends clip texts now and then, hope you're well. But the undertone is clear. She wants me to bridge the silence. I don't. I answer politely, briefly, but I don't step back into that role. Dad hasn't reached out at all. I don't chase them anymore. That's the boundary. Instead, I've built plans. 6 months from now, I'll finish furnishing the condo, sofa, bookshelves, a desk that fits by the window. I've budgeted $4,000 for it, already earmarked from my freelance contracts. Beyond that, I'm saving toward a solo trip to Portugal next spring. For once, my money is a map to my own future, not a bandage for someone else's mistakes. This morning I sat at the small dining table by the window, notebook open, pen in hand. The radiator hissed softly, the air smelled faintly of brewed coffee, and I wrote out my next quarter's goals. 3 new clients. Finish repainting the bedroom. Pay down the mortgage faster. I don't think in terms of rent anymore. I think in terms of freedom. And as I close the notebook, sip my coffee, and watch the street below, I know this. I'm no longer the daughter with envelopes in her hands. I'm the woman with keys in her pocket. And that's enough.